This is the second in a series on Holy Week and the path of the initiate. Yesterday, being Maundy Thursday, we looked at the teaching of Jesus to the disciples on the nature of oneness and dedicating oneself to sacred service as an act of devotion in God for the beloved. From that, I offered the invitation to dedicate yourself in some aspect of your life as sacred service, and to go into it with that awareness to see then what arose for you in this next stage then of this path of the initiate into mystical union, in considering now today the Good Friday crucifixion Garden of Gethsemane experience. And that's where I want to turn now, is looking at what is coming up for pruning. Now, in the time of Jesus, metaphors around gardening and nature were very common. And so it's not surprising we see the use of gardens throughout Scripture as a way of understanding the spiritual path, as a way of recognizing how we move through these different stages in our spiritual growth. On the day of Good Friday, what became Good Friday in the Christian tradition, Jesus, after having spent time with the disciples, goes to the Garden of Gethsemane. And I am standing here in a rose garden because part of what I recognize, and knowing what happened in the Garden of Gethsemane, is where the pruning took place. And that's one of the steps in this mystical path of union, and what the crucifixion represents is the pruning, the cutting away of all of which will no longer serve us in the fulfillment of being in sacred service and living as an act of devotion in God. I want to turn to Scripture because I think that there's something very critical in the story that John presents in his gospel that is sometimes overlooked when we consider what happened in Gethsemane. There's a point where the soldiers come to arrest Jesus, and this is in the 18th chapter and the 5th verse. He asks them, "Who are you looking for?" And they say, Jesus of Nazareth. And his reply is, "I am. I am." So what I want to first present in this second stage of mystical unfolding, in the time of pruning, is where the conversion happens into the recognition that I am, the beloved, is actually what is present while the experience is taking place. So in the pruning is also the preparation. So hold that thought, put a pin in that. I want to go back to what I shared in my own experience of being in a life transition right now. What was it that was being pruned away for me? I have in many ways been a somewhat self-sufficient person. Doesn't mean I wasn't God-reliant, but I relied on that guidance to show me how to provide for myself. And I'm finding in the experience that I'm in now that there's a need to come into a softening and a solicitation of being willing to receive help, to even go in deeper levels of receiving guidance in terms of how to move through this transition in terms of what ministry is looking like, because that's the area where I am being in deep, deep levels of service is in ministry. And so the pruning that's happening for me is coming into this softness and being able to be open and receiving help. And knowing that as I do that and as I'm clear in my intention, then all of the opportunities are going to unfold and present themselves. And we'll talk more about that when we get actually into the resurrection time on Easter Sunday. As you went into your practice yesterday of dedicating an aspect of your life to selfless service and being as an act of devotion, what came up for you for pruning? Did you perhaps get in touch with an area of entitlement or envy? Maybe there was some greed that was showing up in your experience. Was there fear? What was showing up in your experience that now today we will bring into the garden and allow that pruning to take place in order for the preparation of the divine revelation to come in Holy Saturday tomorrow. As you can hear, once again, we still have the accompaniment of planes overhead. I want to advance in the story, so let's pull the pin, where Jesus is in the time with Pilate and the time of the trial. And again, he says something very profound that is another indication of the preparation in this time of pruning. Because Pilate says to him in the 19th chapter, 10th verse, "Do you refuse to speak to me? Do you not know that I have the power to release you? I also have the power to crucify you." So there's this worldly power that tries to exert its force over us in the time of pruning and preparation. And here is Jesus' reply to him: "You have no power over me unless it has been granted to you by what is above." You have no power over me. So in other words, as we are in this pruning process, the activity of the world that may be showing up has absolutely no power over us unless somehow or another it is not to be part of our path, in which case it will be under the hand of Spirit to direct. But there is no worldly power that can interfere with the preparation. And this is what he said to him. Now what happens? As we know, Jesus is crucified at the cross. And he goes there with the very deep awareness that there is no power, there is no dominion over him, for it is the spiritual power that is present. And how is that evidenced in the Gospel of John? Still in the 19th chapter, in the 25th verse, we are told that standing near the cross were his mother Mary and the disciple whom he loved. Let me put this to you, that in the time of the pruning, in the time of the crucifixion, there is always present love. There are two representations of love that were standing there in the midst of what was happening. There was his mother Mary, that is the divine feminine. She is the representation of agape, that which is able to embrace the totality of the experience that we may find ourselves in and bring to it that softness and that mothering love that we need, the tenderness. There is also present at the cross the disciple whom he loved, which is John. John is the divine masculine, and John represents the eros, that which is yet to be revealed, that which is yet to come. It is the spark of what will be the transformed consciousness. The two of them together are present in that time of the pruning, in the time of the crucifixion. There is the agape that enfolds and embraces all of what is. There is the divine masculine that is the eros, that is the representation of what can be. And together they are with the man, Jesus of Nazareth, who is through the then time of going into the tomb and coming into the resurrection on Easter Sunday, being lifted up in the fully Christed awareness. So I ask you today, are you willing to give yourself over to the pruning? Are you ready to step into your time of crucifixion, taking whatever it is that arose for you in this practice of sacred service and being willing to place it into the tomb? And if you are, I invite you to write your name on a piece of paper, fold it, and place it in an area that would be symbolic for you of entering into the tomb. Maybe into a cupboard, or perhaps burying it in the ground, or in the sand if you are near the beach. But placing it somewhere that will represent symbolically you stepping into the tomb and going into the silence. We will come back together again tomorrow for stage 3 of the 4 on this path of the initiative and going into mystical union. For the time tomorrow is Holy Saturday, of being in the silence and being in the void. But for today, Good Friday, the pruning, the crucifixion, are you willing to let what is no longer serving you be cut away, and to hold in your awareness that there is the presence of total love, Agape love that is embracing you in this experience, as well as the presence of Eros that is going to reveal what is coming next. And as you hold this all, recognize that you are a divine emanation, and that the story of the initiate, the story of mystical union, is in fact your story too. God bless you, and namaste.